got an exciting keynote now from Dr. Harold Nelson, who's an architect and visiting scholar in the School of Computer Science at the University of Montana. He was a Nuremberg Distinguished Professor of Design in the School of Design at Carnegie Mellon University from 2009 to 2010. In 2001, he served as President of the International Society for the Systems Sciences. He's also known as the co-author of The Design Way, a book considered by some to be the Rosetta Stone of design. He's worked with a variety of organisations, including non-profits, corporate, state and federal agencies, international governments, and the United Nations. I'm really happy to have Harold here. Here he is. Welcome, Harold.
Well, good morning, everyone. I appreciate that you let us back into the country after that last little incident. We paid for all the damage, everything's okay. They gave us a visa. Anyway, we're very glad to be here. It's 1 degree below zero back home, but that's not the only reason we're glad. Love the country, love the people. Would like to make this an ongoing habit. One of the things that came to mind when I saw that the title was collaboration and the implication was collaboration, that an important part of collaboration is communication. And so I wanted to talk a bit about design communication today. I work a lot with a variety of types of people. I'm known as an accidental vagrant. I show up in a lot of other people's territories, their lives, their professional groups. And in every case, I find that a lot of times there's confusion when people are trying to talk about design, collaborate around design, because it's never really clear. Well, not too long ago, I went to a very isolated base, many, many miles to the south of here. That's south, right? Many, many miles that way. Okay, I went that way. About as far south as you can go before you start going north again. Very isolated research station. So my host took me to the lunch hut, the cafeteria, and as I was sitting down to have lunch, somebody in the cafeteria hollered out 7, and everybody just erupted in laughter. I thought, what was that all about? So I asked my host, I said, what was that? He said, well, we've been out here with one another telling each other the same old jokes over and over again, that to save time, we've just numbered it. That's great. So I hollered out, 14. Nothing. They just stared at me. So I asked my host, what happened? And he said, well, obviously, not everybody can tell a joke. You told it wrong. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk today about was encoding terms and the importance of decoding terms that we use all the time. I've heard the term design used, and I know it's encoded when I hear somebody using it, because pretty soon they sort of explain what it's about. When I'm reading materials on design, sometimes it takes me a while saying, okay, this is what they mean by design. So I want to talk about that idea of coding and decoding terms like design, innovation, creativity, all those terms that we throw around all the time. And if we want to collaborate, not just with people in the same office building, we want to collaborate with people in totally different realms of professional practice. We have to be much clearer about, more transparent about what we mean when we use these terms. Because, a friend of mine, Russ Akoff, said quite well, is the righter you do the wrong thing, the wronger you get. So if we start off with a misunderstanding, things don't get better. They get worse and worse and worse. So I wanted to talk about, or focus on, stance, design stance in this case. Not design approach, but design stances. So that we begin to explore a bit about what this idea of design encoding is. So the designing and the process of communication and collaboration depends on our taking time to explain or make clear what we're meaning. And it doesn't really matter. I'm not selling one way of understanding what design is. I'm not trying to tell you there's a right way to understand design. I'm just saying that you need to declare what you mean when you're using the term design or innovation or any of the other terms that come up. I'm not an expert in medical health necessarily, although where I come from, it takes as long to become a licensed architect as it does to become a general practitioner. And you do get involved with designing things like hospitals, clinics, things like that. So you just, by necessity, become aware of what the health industry, we call it, is, or the health practice industry is all about. So I know one of the things you're never supposed to do is read off of a slide, but I have to read off this one because it's so good, is that part of the problem of our not being clear about what we mean when we say what design is we don't know what we mean when we say design, for sure. So anyway, there are these two young fish swimming along. They happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" The two young fish swim on for a bit, and eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" We're so immersed, and water is a mystery, it turns out. Scientists who study specialized on water don't know what water is. It's a big mystery. It's a very interesting one if you want to read the literature on it. It's very interesting. So anyway, design is like water. We don't know what it is, really. We have evidence of the design mind at work 3.2 million years ago. It's when the design mind starts to leave evidence. It's evolving. It's not even with the modern human, but we're making stuff to expand who we are. What we're called as the prosthetic gods. We create things to add on to make us more than what we were born to be. So, I'm going to use a metaphor to talk a bit about this idea of design. It's going to be design archipelagos, to talk about what the hell design is, because design, the way we've used it, experienced it as humans, has a long history. It has a long past, very long past, way, way beyond the Bauhaus or whatever you think about the history of design. It's a long time ago. It was the one thing that anthropologists start to look for is evidence of the design mind at work in the artifacts they find, whether or not this is human, proto-human, what kind of fossil it is. It's a very old process. And then I want to talk a bit, I won't talk a lot about the past, the development of the design mind. I want to talk a bit about design at present. And I want to talk a bit about design in the future. So we have and it's still with us, an archaic understanding and appreciation of what design is. It still resides with us in some of our institutions, our beliefs. We have types of design that are in the present, that are normative, that are quite successful. And if I have time, I might want to talk a bit about nascent design and some incipient design that is beginning to evolve to come into the fore. Because it's not like people will get frustrated when they talk with me about design if they're just first introduced to design and say, you people can't make up your minds. What is design? How do you define it? What the hell is it? They get a little irritated because you don't have a good definition of what design is. And one of the things is that design is evolving. It has been evolving. It's been evolving in a number of areas. And the big question as a designer you want to ask is not what it's evolving into, what do we want it to evolve into? It's like I heard, I think even today there was a mention of, well, what will medical health be? And I hear this a lot, whether it's in software development, in architecture, in education. You get into one of these settings and somebody say, what will this be in 20 years? What will it be in 30 years? The question from a design perspective is, what do you want it to be? You're designers, you're creating reality. You create the real world. What do you want it to be? Not what do you want to guess it's going to be. You don't want to be reacting to change, you want to create change. That's what designers are very good at. So, part of this metaphor is to talk about design cultures and about cross-cultural communication. So, using the metaphor of using it maybe a bit, I've created different kind of island ecosystems where designers reside, and they get their identity by the place they reside in. Who they are as designers is defined by where they're living, where they're located. So, art design, where design is defined, focused mostly on aesthetics. Aesthetics drives what designers do in these ecosystems, in these places. What's interesting, was interesting to me when I discovered, like architects can practice architecture as an art, or as a science, or as a design, without paying any penalty. You could create sculptures that you put people in, you can make machines that people reside in, or you can create designs for people. It doesn't matter. So, design as art. I notice like here, if you look around the buildings in downtown, they're very much what we would call formal architecture. They're about form and about appearance, and they're made to be seen at a distance. And it's not just happening here, it's in a lot of places. So aesthetics drives a lot of what that design field is about. How it looks. Got some crazy looking buildings down there, by the way, but that drives it. And then craft design. And craft design is focused on material. Primarily focused on material. So I used to do ceramics for years. And that's called a functional art or design, ceramic design. And it's very much about the material, about the clay, about the glaze. It's people who made furniture, it's about wood, it's about steel tubing. And nowadays, it's coming back into the fore because people want to know about material that's sustainable. You want to design materials that are sustainable, that are good for the earth, not bad. So this whole area of craft design is coming sort of into its own. We have transaction design. And transaction design, by the way, I have a certain bias, so if it comes through, I apologize, because this, I'm not trying to make judgments about any of these different domains. I'm just trying to describe them so I can understand more about what design is for folks in different places. Transaction design is where somebody will decide, I think this is a cool thing, I'm going to make it and sell it to people. People don't ask you, people don't contract with you for a service. They don't say, I want, and I really want it, I want an Apple computer. Steve Jobs didn't do that. He said, you know, this kind of computer would really be cool, and I bet we could sell it to people. And they did, a lot of it. And there was a lot of transaction design, and I heard a bit today that there is the same sort of thing in the medical world where you can create something and sell it to people. This is a good thing. You need this. You do that a lot, which is fine. I mean, that's part of buyer beware. There's a whole tradition of free enterprise, everything. It's an important part of our societies and cultures. But a lot of designers reside in that place. I was talking to the design team at Apple a year or so ago, and there was some concern because the young designers didn't know for sure how to read the consumer public like their founder used to. They didn't know that they could, what they loved is when somebody came in and told them, this is what we want you to design. We want you to design this thing. They were comfortable. They couldn't do what the founder of Apple had done, where he said, you know, it would be really cool, and I think people would really love it if they had one of these things, and we could sell it to them. So they were a little bit nervous. Problematized design. I've heard problem mentioned here so many times. This is the area where the trigger for design is justified because somebody sees there's a problem. It turns out that people are uncomfortable taking action if they can't define a problem to justify taking an action. Politicians love this. I don't know if you have politicians here. We have them back in the States. They love to tell us the problems. And they come up with problems that scare the hell out of us, make us angry. We want to go against the barricade. We're going to go to the streets. We're going to do this. This is a problem. Life is based on identifying and being afraid of or frightened by problems. Everything is justified. I work with large groups of people on occasion, and when I ask them, what is it that you desire in your future? What's your desiderata? What is that? That's so impossible because they've never thought of it like that. You can say, what's the problem? What's your biggest problem? Oh yeah, they got a list of problems, just, you know, everything you can imagine. Let's go fix it. We'll editorialize just a bit about this because there's big problems with problems. Taking that kind of support. I mean, there are problems, but there's a problem when you can only take action based on somebody defining a problem for you. I don't know if any of you have heard of Horst Riddle and his wicked problems. If you haven't, I would highly suggest that to find a copy of his paper on wicked problems. He does an incredibly good job at defining the difference between tame problems and wicked problems. And he says, if you can say what a problem is, your job is done. It's not a significant design project at all. The big challenge is what you think a problem is, which isn't a problem. That's why it's wicked. People try to turn them into problems anyway. Scientized design. That's where universities, academics, others have declared that design is a science, and it's based on what's true. So you take action and you do things based on what's true, what can be proven to be true. It's heavily engaged in social science, in action research, and in when I visit universities, visit PhD students, and they're trying to do a doctoral program in design, a lot of them get really frustrated because they're told to treat what they want to do as a research project. And what they want to do is design a new health system, or design a new education system, or design something. But the traditional PhD program that's based on doing research is totally different from what a design approach is. And there are ways for doctoral programs in design to frame themselves so that they can act out of something that's not a scientized. I guess I'm editorializing again. Anyway, there are ways to do that. That there are ways that you can advance knowledge. The thing that people don't understand so well at any level is that description and explanation do not prescribe action. Prediction and control don't justify action. You need ethics and you need values. So description and explanation do not prescribe action. One great example from back where I live in the Wild West was they did a huge study of this area called the High Plains. Collected data, they had volumes and volumes and volumes of data on this geographic area. What they found was that people had abandoned that area to the extent that the population was now at the level of what had been considered as frontier in the 1800s. The only populations that had increased at all were Native Americans and buffalo. So what did that data tell us to do? Go out and harass the Native Americans some more? But it didn't tell us anything. It told us nothing. Action has to come from value, from intention, from design. Design is that bridge. The idea that, and this is one of the reasons that systems is such an important part to bring in this, is that design is a social system, and designers don't act on their own, and that you need a very important group of people who can come in and say, this is the direction we want our lives to go in. This is what we want. This is what we value. So can you help us do that? Designers can't choose direction. They can't pick direction. Nowadays, I don't know if it's here, but back home there's a big sort of argument about global warming. And people have got the whole thing wrong because they argue now and fight about, well, do you believe in global warming or not? Do you believe in good science or not? And the point is not that there isn't data showing that temperatures are changing. The point is what's important about it. Do you want to live with it? Is it a good thing for you or not? None of you are old enough to remember when the Soviets, a bunch of folks up to the north, wanted to spray coal dust on the ice caps so that it would melt the ice caps, so that they could have passage in the northern passages. So this global warming is worked out. Believe me, there's a lot of companies that are very happy with global warming. There's a lot of material, land, militarily, there's advantage. A lot of people are really happy. It's not a matter of whether or not this data is true or science is true. It's a matter of what do you value, what's important. Design, I think you have an industrial design program here. Engineering design is often focused on what's efficient and effective technologies. Now we have artificial design. This is an artificial island. We have artificial design where algorithms are replacing or attempting to replace human activity. Systemic design, which is one of the things that I'm most interested in now, is that everything you design is either an element in a system or it's a system. Always. So you never design something that's isolated from other systems. You don't design a medical product or a device that's isolated from its environment. It's always part of a system. It's an element. In systemic design, you don't look at something, you look between things. So you don't look at a patient, you look between the patient and their family, the patient and where they work, the patient and their environment. You look between things. So there's a lot of differences. And most recently, my colleagues and I have started working with what we call advanced design, wide design and deep design. I won't go so much into that, but that's developing, which we don't have for some strange reason. We don't have good philosophy of design. We borrow a lot. We borrow a lot from sciences and humanities. Now we don't have a good sort of body of knowledge on design philosophy. And deep design, one of the things, and finally, what I've heard is people projecting about the design that's out there, the stuff, the objects, everything that's out there. And guess what's the most important thing in design? It's you. You as the designer. Your frame of references, your world views, the way your perspectives, the way you see things. You're the one that defines then what can be seen as external. So it's not all about objectivity and externality. It's about us, what we see, what our assertions are, all those things. Part of communication, collaboration comes from disclosing that as much as what we all think health is, or what the best new technology is. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold.
Yeah.
We've probably got time for a question or two, if anyone has a question for Harold. I really enjoyed the redefinition or the definitions of design. I mean, as a designer, it was really good to see the different definitions you had and that whole thing about it's all about you and your own disclosure and being true to that when you come to a situation. So.
And these islands, by the way, are populated by people who have institutions, schools, journals, everything that are working quite well. They're not going to go away. None of these islands, none of these populations are going to go away. We have industrial designers, we have graphic designers, we have architects, we have all these people residing on these islands, supported by their school systems, supported by everything. They're going to be for a long time in place because they're useful.
I have one question for you over here.
Yeah.
Keith?
When we decided that we thought design was interesting, we'd come from systems thinking background, so decided that was important to help we were having trouble with that. And then we realised design was interesting. But we very quickly got sucked into design as a process. And then completely by accident we tripped across Carol who utterly confused me at the beginning because here's a guy who's actually trying to do something, tell me about the philosophy of design and creative design culture versus just doing it and getting on with it. And having been soaked in Harold now for 7 years, I'm beginning to understand a whole different angle to it, which saved my eyes a lot. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David from the University of Sydney. A question in regards to you saying that the most important thing about the design is yourself as a designer. My question is, where do you find the boundary between yourself and the environment that you're in? Because as a designer, we're meant to be receptive to the stimulus and obviously work towards changing our environment or influencing our environment. But where do you find the boundary between yourself and the environment? Because then isn't it just a cycle?
Yeah. It's a good question, and I've got a schema that we've developed over a period of time to kind of help us understand that there are these ideas of, we use filters where we block out things from the world. We don't allow them in. People have very strong filters. They have religious filters, value filters, political filters. They just can't get the information. It's not allowed in. So we use those filters. We have lenses that allow us, not in a narrow sense, but make things clear. And Hal Lindstone did a great piece with multiple perspectives. It's been expanded. Anyway, they used for one of the shuttle disasters, he used this model of multiple perspectives. So we had a perspective that says it's a technical perspective, it's a personal perspective, it's an organizational perspective. Now, what happened? Why did that shuttle explode? Well, they found out they wouldn't find out through a technical perspective. They found out through a personal perspective. People were afraid to bring a problem up to the management. And they would have never found that information if they hadn't looked at the situation through that perspective. People have now expanded those perspectives to include ethical and a number of other things. But, and there are ways, I've used this with students, you know, look at this situation, this is this perspective, tell me what you see. What can you get through that lens? Now look at it through this lens. Now look at it through this. Because there is no objective reality that's not mediated in some way by filters, lenses, and a lot of other things. By your mental models, I usually start up with one of these settings where I have a little graphic showing listening channels. So I ask, what channel are you listening to me now on? Which channel? Tuned out, tuned in for things that reinforce what you already believe, tuned in for things that are going to challenge what you believe. I mean, there's all these channels. I find myself always defaulting to one. Like, is this telling me what I already know? What it's good? Anyway, you ask somebody, was that a good talk or was that a good paper? And they'll say, no, it wasn't so good. So then you have to go back and find out, well, what channel were you on when you were engaged? What were you listening for? So you're a part of the reality as much as the reality is. Because you're choosing how to listen, how to see, filter, all of it. And you have to get very good at it as a designer. You have to get very good at doing it and managing.
Thank you.
Just take one more.
Hi. Thanks. I really like the comparison you made with water, and it inspired me to just think a bit about design as water, but also as he was saying first, it left me a bit confused because looking at all these definitions of design, I'm a trained industrial designer, and my research area is everyday design. So it's the design that happens in the everyday life by designers and non-trained designers. So in a way, if we think about, as you propose, design as water, and that you mentioned something about design is about generating change and not reacting to it. And it made me think about change as water. So if then, because how do we know change is generated by another change, and it's like a chain of change. And designers are somehow like the fishes navigating those changes. But then with the idea of the wicked, what if wicked design is one of those fishes happening in that chain. And then the question that I would ask you, if you could tell us a bit of how could a design be working within that water of change within the wicked. And if you say that it is a matter of value, then what is value? How is value not another water?
It is. It's one of the things, being a designer, one of the things that it takes is tremendous courage, because nothing is given, values aren't given, foreground, background isn't given. You're making all judgments about what's valuable, what's foreground, what's background, what's within the frame, what's outside of the frame. Design is there are no absolute answers, right answers for any of the design things. One of the things that they say is that the fish will be the last one to discover water. So as a designer, the challenge is how do we step out of what we're immersed in to see what we're immersed in. And there are ways that people have of doing that. I don't know if you've heard of the overview effect. Just one example, when astronauts and cosmonauts go into space, they've all come back and said, when we turned back and looked at the Earth for the first time, we had a cognitive shift that totally changed our lives. Because now we could see what we were immersed in from a distance. Now we saw where we lived. And they were never, every one of them said the same thing. They had a cognitive shift. It may have been, they were technical, they could have been humanists. They had this incredible cognitive shift. So as a designer, how do we step out of what we're immersed in so that we can see it? And so that we can challenge it, change it.
Extremely thought-provoking. So thank you, Harold. And Harold will be around for the rest of the day. So if you've got any more conversations you'd like to have with him, please.
Oh, by the way, how's my Australian? Everybody understand?
Excellent. Thanks, Harold. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce